All right, everybody. Thank you for attending tonight. I really appreciate your presence on this seminar. My name is Siddhartha Kamasetti, and I'm an owner of Texo Capital. We are a licensed regional center. We're licensed by the USCIS, and I myself am an attorney. I practice corporate transactions, many of those transactions involving real estate. So I have in-depth experience in evaluating real estate deals, negotiating real estate transactions, and specifically I have deep insight into the EB-5 program. As an owner of Texo Capital, I have had the privilege of participating in several EB-5 transactions since the past 6 years. And today, our webinar is intending to educate all of you on how the EB-5 program works. And in addition, we will walk through one of our projects that we're currently working on from an EB-5 perspective, just a brief overview of that project. And we also are lucky enough to have Jennifer Hermansky present today, and she's an immigration attorney from Greenberg Traurig, and she's been practicing in the EB-5 space for several years. I'll allow her to give her introduction a little bit later in the presentation, but she has significant experience in working with nationals from all over the world to help them to file their EB-5 applications and be compliant with the requirements of the EB-5 program. So she'll explain more on that, and specifically for Indian nationals and how, some of the challenges that Indian nationals go through and how they can overcome those challenges. So without further ado, we will now start. Texo Capital is the name of our company, as I just mentioned, and this webinar is covering the route to U.S. immigration through the EB-5 visa program. So just as a little bit of background, the EB-5 program it came into being in 1990 under the Clinton administration, and it has been approved every 3 years since that time as a pilot program. As of current, we are approved through September 30th, 2019, this program. It is administered by the USCIS, which is the U.S. Customs and Immigration Service, and there are 10,000 EB-5 visas that are available worldwide per year. And what that means is each country has a certain allocation of those 10,000 visas. So India, for instance, is allocated 7% of the 10,000 visas. That equates to approximately 700 EB-5 visas are earmarked for Indian nationals each year. And I'll describe the consequence of that and how that works later on, how that impacts EB-5 investors. The policy of the program was to incentivize foreign direct investment. That means investment from those foreign investors that are abroad. And in return, the US government said our policy is to give a green card if people utilize this EB-5 program to invest in the US. So this next slide, this is going over the requirements for an EB-5 visa. So the basic requirements are that the EB-5 visa requires a $500,000 US investment into a project. Now, if that investment creates 10 full-time jobs, then that investor is granted permanent residency in the US, which is a green card, which then leads to citizenship if they so choose, as well as a return of their investment amount. That means that $500,000 comes back to you after you go through the entire immigration process and get your green card. We'll go over this in more detail in later slides, but these are the basic requirements. This piece that's talking about at risk, this is a legal term. One of the requirements of the EB-5 program says that your money needs to have some risk inherent to it when it's going into a project. That means that you can't put your money into a savings account in the US and think that you're going to get a green card. So basically the way that we satisfy this requirement is the money goes to the real estate developer in most instances, or into the project through a loan. A loan is a financial instrument that has some inherent risk in it. Of course, we try and mitigate that risk as much as possible, and that's part of what our company does. But that is how we meet this requirement. So in the next slide, we're talking just about EB-5 in the program in general. So there are two investment amounts that you might have heard of. One is a $500,000 EB-5 investment amount, and the other one is a $1 million EB-5 investment amount. What this means is the US government has said that if your project that you're investing in is located in a TEA, which is a targeted employment area, then you only need to invest $500,000. If the project is located outside one of these TEA regions, then you need to invest $1 million into the project to obtain your green card. A TEA, I'll explain later, but just to give you a brief overview, it basically means that the project is situated in an area that has an unemployment rate that's equal to 150% of the federal unemployment rate. So the government is saying that these projects, we want to incentivize investment into these specific locations that have higher unemployment rates. And to help facilitate that, we will allow investors to invest the lower amount of $500,000. Now, there's two investment mechanisms that you can utilize to obtain an EB-5 green card. One is a direct investment into a business. Typically, that is done through purchasing equity or shares directly in a business of some kind, say a gas station or a restaurant or something of that nature. And the other mechanism is an investment through a regional center sponsored project. That's basically investing into a fund that is managed by a regional center. We'll go over the benefits of working through a regional center in just a few minutes, but just for now, know that there's two routes to performing an EB-5 investment. One is through a direct investment into a business. The other one is through a regional center sponsored fund, investing in one of those. Now, just a general note, the investment funds must be authenticated as a lawful source. This basically means that you need to prove that the money was gained by from lawful means. So you could receive the money as a gift from a relative. You could receive the money as if it was part of your savings, or let's say you're getting a home equity loan on a home that you own. All of these can be done. However, you have to just prove that the source of money is legitimate in each case. And you can do so by showing tax returns, typically 5 years of tax return. If you're using a property, if you're going to sell a piece of property to get your investment amount or a portion of your investment amount, you can show evidentiary proof that you owned title to the property. You can show that the sale documents that you sold the property to come into that money. You can also show bank statements. You can use dividend income that you're making from a company, or use your savings. The savings don't have to be made in the US. They could be savings in India or other places. Jen will go over this in more detail later on in the presentation, but there's a variety of ways that you can demonstrate the lawful source of funds, and there's a variety of sources in which you can draw your money from. Like I said, the gift mechanism is pretty popular in India. Also, what we've noticed is a lot of people own property in India, so you can take a loan out on your Indian property and use those proceeds as part of your EB-5 investment. You can even sell that piece of property in India. There's a variety of mechanisms, and we can go over that a little bit later as well. So in this next slide, we're talking about the advantages of an EB-5 visa. As compared to other visa categories, this is the fastest path to a green card today. And this is compared to the EB2 and EB3 visa programs, for instance, which have 50 to 60-year waits for Indian nationals in those categories. So EB5 right now today is around an 8-year wait to get your green card or your conditional green card. Another difference is that the EB5 visa is self-sponsored. Some of you may be on an H-1B visa that are listening in right now. An H-1B visa is employer-sponsored, as you well know. Here, you're sponsoring yourself by investing your $500,000. So there is no employer sponsorship requirement here. So it leads to more flexibility down later on from a job perspective. There's also high application approval rates. So if you invest in a good project and you work with a quality immigration attorney to put together your EB5 application, typically you see high approval rates for the EB5 program of those applications and to get to the green card. There's also certain benefits for those that do get their green card, that eventually get their green card, such as lower tuition costs. You can qualify as an in-state resident in a lot of instances. You're not a foreign, you're not paying foreign tuition fees, and that's one of the benefits. And this program, unlike other investment programs, has your principal returned to you. So in a successful outcome, again, your money comes back to you. Your $500,000 will come back to you at the end of the loan term, because typically the money is invested through a loan instrument to a real estate development project. And at the end of your immigration process, that loan is paid back and you get your $500,000 back. So we mentioned earlier, there were two mechanisms: a direct investment or a regional center sponsored investment. So this slide is talking more about the regional center and what it is. So a regional center is a company that's licensed by the USCIS to commit ongoing financial and operational commitments, as well as investment administrative activities. So a regional center is basically a company that is administering the EB5 program on behalf of its investors. They do a variety of things, including originate the project deal. They negotiate with the borrower. They look to make sure that the project that the EB5 funds are going to be invested in are compliant with all the program requirements. That is to say that it creates the necessary jobs per each investor, and that there is a there's strong fundamentals for fund repayment, as well as compliance with some of the laws, such as providing a matter of hoe compliant business plan and other elements as well. So regional centers, one of the powerful aspects of them is that they're able to pool the EB5 capital for investment. So that means that several EB5 investors can participate on a regional center sponsored fund, and those funds can be combined and deployed as a loan. So regional centers have that ability to do that. The regional center will act as the manager of the fund and deploy those funds appropriately into the real estate project. They're also allowed to count indirect and induced jobs to satisfy this 10-job requirement from the EB5 program. So I mentioned before that each investor has to create 10 jobs in order to satisfy their EB5 visa requirements. Now, if you're going to do a direct EB5 investment, you can only count something called direct jobs, but regional centers are allowed to count direct, indirect, and induced jobs to satisfy this requirement. I'll explain what those are in just a moment. So here's an example slide of the difference between direct EB5 and regional center EB5. So let's take, for instance, a gas station. So let's say somebody is going to purchase shares in a company that is going to build a gas station through direct EB5. So $500,000 will go into that company and they'll build and operate a gas station. Well, with direct EB5, you have to have some kind of active management role in that company, the gas station company. You also have to create 10 jobs, and they can only be direct jobs. So what that means is if you're constructing the gas station, you can't count any of those construction jobs towards job creation. You would have to count those people that are operating the actual gas station. So the sales attendant, the person operating the cash register, another person who's stocking inventory. Those have to be full-time jobs. And that means that they have 35 hours or more per week. And those jobs need to be sustained for a period of time so that they're not considered temporary jobs. So typically they shouldn't be less than 2 years, that job. And you need to see that role is consistently open in that company, either filled or that role is there, existent. So these are the requirements from direct EB5. You have to prove that you've created these direct jobs through payroll taxes, W-2 pay stubs, all the employment materials that shows that each of those 10 employees have been employed and those jobs have been sustained for the period of time required. So this is a heavy burden, and this imputes more risk typically to an EB5 investor, an immigration risk point, if you will. That is to say that there's a little bit more risk inherent in satisfying the 10 job creation count as opposed to, say, a regional center type of project. So in a regional center scenario, let's take the gas station, for instance, again. There's an indirect investment through a regional center sponsored fund. So the regional center will originate a fund, and each of the limited partners will be an EB5 investor that is investing $500,000 into that fund by purchasing shares of the fund. Each investor, or the regional center, will then deploy that money as a loan to the owner of the gas station, or the one who's going to build the gas station. So let's call them a real estate developer. So this is a passive investment. There's no active management required for the EB5 investor. That means just merely being an owner of the fund is satisfying their operational requirements from an EB5 perspective. Now, the job creation piece, we are providing a loan to the company that's building the gas station and going to operate it. The 10 jobs can be counted as any combination of direct jobs, indirect jobs, and induced jobs. What this means is, so the direct people that are going to be hired, the cashier and others, can be counted towards one of the jobs. An indirect job means construction. You're going to be constructing this gas station. So you can count the construction workers. Those are indirect jobs that are being created as a result of investing your money. And there's several more jobs there through indirect. There might be an architect or an engineer who is going to be utilized for that project as well for the construction. Those are indirect jobs. There are induced jobs. So induced jobs may be even more tenuous, such as some worker who has to drive the gas to the gas station, a truck driver, for instance. So there's an economic impact that's created from your EB5 investment to create direct, indirect, and induced jobs. As a result, the government they accept an economic report that's tailored to the project as evidence of job creation. So, I'm sorry, not as evidence of job creation, but to illustrate the number of jobs that will be created from the project. This is a very important distinction. This basically means that instead of these W-2 pay stubs and these employment contracts and tax returns to prove job creation, we can show that as per an economic report, that means the developer spent the money, the EB5 money, in a way that they said they would spend it. So that is for construction, for architecture, for hiring the actual direct jobs. All of those things are captured in the economic report. So here's an example of an economic report. This is just an illustration to help you understand the concept. So for a regional center sponsored project, let's say that you're building a hotel, and this hotel has a budget that's going to cost $10 million for construction, $1 million for architecture fees, and the hotel, once it's stabilized, will generate $20 million of revenue totally. So this is the budget, and this is also the pro forma for revenues. So the RIMS 2 is an economic, it's basically an economic model that the USCIS accepts. And what that says is there's job creation multipliers. So for instance, every $1 million in construction you spend, there's 15 jobs, a 15 multiplier ascribed to that $1 million. So $10 million of construction cost would create 150 jobs, 15 jobs per million. $1 million spent on architect and engineering may create 8 jobs if the multiplier is 8. So 8 times 1 is 8 again. And revenues also can create jobs. Here there's 200 jobs created. If there's a 10, the multiplier is 10. So in total, there's 358 jobs created from this project as per the economic report. So the regional center will look to see that the project has a good job estimating their numbers. Let's say that the project says that they're going to spend 10 million, but they only spend 9 million. If that's the case, then only 135 jobs will be created, 15 times 9. So a regional center such as ours like to create job cushions for our investors. That means let's create more than 10 jobs per each investor in case there's some variance in what the projections were. So let's create 14 to 20 jobs per investor. This is how we underwrite our deals to add more safety and mitigate risk for the investors. Also, even though that hotel revenues can procure jobs, regional centers such as ours do not want to depend on those jobs to satisfy the job creation count. So even though this project can support maybe 35 investors, that's 10 jobs per investor, 35 would be 350, we would take 15 investors. We want all the job creation to be done for our investors after construction period, once you reach the certificate of occupancy. And the reason we do that is because we don't want to depend on all these other expenditures, all these other revenues to satisfy the job creation count. We want our investors to know once the certificate of occupancy is issued, their green card requirements have been satisfied. That's important to us, and that's important to our investor. Oftentimes, you can also have the developer get certain assurances, such as completion guarantees, to ensure that your construction period is going to be complete and the certificate of occupancy will be there. You also have other protections, such as a senior lender, a notable senior lender that underwrites a deal heavily to also make sure there's mechanisms to make sure that you get to that finished, stabilized hotel or whatever project it may be that has more value and that creates the necessary jobs. This is an example of a TEA that I mentioned earlier. So a TEA, again, is a targeted employment area. So here, for instance, let's say we're doing a project located in this orange area, in this purple area in Cleveland, Ohio. Well, we could draw a map that combines several census tracts, and those census tracts, if they equal 150% of the national unemployment rate, and that's accepted by a state agency, then it's going to be considered a TEA. So we can pre-qualify a project beforehand, before we even start doing any other diligence, to make sure that it falls within a TEA. These TEA requirements will be more difficult after November 21st. We'll go over that, and Jen can also shed some light on that, but we're not going to be able to, long story short, we're not going to be able to combine as many census tracts as previously to get to a TEA qualified project. It'll be more difficult. And TEAs will not be state administered anymore. They'll be federally administered. The Department of Homeland Security will approve and disapprove of whether a project is a TEA come November 21st. These are important changes that may make it more difficult for EB5 investors. This is the program mechanism. So this is just going through some steps to identify some of the major program process pieces. So the first, the USCIS will issue a designation or a license to a regional center. Then the foreign investor will invest $500,000 into a regional center sponsored fund. This is an Indian national in our case. The regional center sponsored fund will then loan the money to the real estate developer. Then the government will provide conditional residency to the foreign investor. This is called a conditional residency or conditional green card. It's the same thing as a green card. It just means that the conditions are that you have to create the 10 jobs or evidence that you created the 10 jobs after a 2-year period of holding that green card, that conditional green card. Once you submit this job creation and the proof that you created the 10 jobs, that condition drops off your green card and it's just a green card at that point. It's just a permanent residency. So while you can come and be a green card holder here at step 4, your green card is permanent, is indefinitely in place now once the job creation part has been satisfied and approved by the government. At that point, the loan is repaid to the foreign investor. Here's an investor step-by-step process. First, you need to understand whether you want to do the EB-5 program. If you choose to do so, then you're going to select a project and you're going to subscribe to a fund, a regional centers fund, by signing the subscription documents for that fund. That basically means you're going to purchase the units or shares in that fund. Then once you sign those documents, you're going to make a qualifying investment of $500,000 into the fund. Along with these subscription documents, you'll also review a private purchase memorandum that is an overview of the risks of the project and other details of the project. And then you'll make your qualifying investment. You will then file something called an I-526 petition. And this is basically your EB-5 application. It's going to show all sorts of background information about yourself, but the main component is your source of fund, your lawful source of fund proof. That'll be in this petition. They also need to see that you've already invested your money so that your money is technically at risk as per the requirements in this petition. And the regional center will give you the evidence that you invested that money to actually attach to your application. The investor and their family members will all receive a conditional green card. And then the investor is going to file an I-829 petition. This is your proof that you've created the jobs. So the regional center will give that evidence, will work with you and the immigration attorney so that you can file this I-829 petition and remove the conditions on your green card. Now you will only have a green card at that point without conditions on it. This timeline pulls everything together. So basically, as we said earlier, you're going to make your investment here, and then you're going to file your I-526 petition. These numbers at the bottom, these times, are pulled right from the USCIS website, but these times are variable. They depend on how staffed the USCIS is, how many applications are there. Jen can give you probably a better realistic time frame that she's seeing right now for EB-5 application processing. Right now, the website lists 27 and a half months or so. It can be about 2 years right now, from my understanding, for I-526 application approval. And then you're going to file something. If you're an H-1B visa holder, you'll file an I-485, which adjusts your status in the US. If you're in India, then you're going to go to, you're going to do consular processing in Mumbai. So you'll have to sit for an interview in the US consulate that's located in Mumbai. This process can take, it's saying 10 to 14 months on the USCIS website, but this can happen much quicker. Then you're given your conditional green card. At this point, after your status is adjusted or you have sat for your interview in Mumbai, you have to hold this green card for 24 months. Now, 60 to 90 days before your 2 years are finished for your conditional green card, that is the time that you file your I-829 application. This is the application where you submit proof that you created the jobs. This application, again, has a 29 to 49 month time period that the USCIS is listing right now on their website. And this is the total immigration timeline. Now above, this is the India cutoff date. So I mentioned on the first slide that India has 700 out of the 10,000 visas per year. Since India has now been determined in July of this year. It was determined that India has more EB-5 applications that are pending than there are available visa slots this year. It's in what is called retrogression. That means that now there's a wait time here until you can actually have your interview and get your conditional green card. So right now, while it might take 2 years to get your I-526 approved, Indians are seeing a 6-year wait during this period of time just because they need the visa available for them, that quota for that specific year, before they can have that interview. So if you apply today, they're saying it's approximately from the beginning of filing your I-526 to getting your conditional green card around 8 years. So this is still the fastest mechanism to getting a green card today. But that's the impact of this visa retrogression for India. That just means that many Indians have been using it. Now below, we have a project timeline. This project timeline is showing what's happening to the real estate project that your money is invested in. So once you file your I-526 petition, your money is now going to be invested into a real estate project as a loan. During the first 2 years of the real estate project, you are seeing the construction happen for that project. And then after the 2 years of construction, then the project is being operated. So if it's a hotel, you're seeing operation of the hotel and people are staying in the rooms and it's operating. Then at some point, could happen year 4, year 10, a refinancing of the project or a sale of the project could occur. And that's typically where the money is returned to the investors from a refinancing or a sale event. Now, if you remember earlier, I was telling you about regional centers. So remember the budget. If your jobs are only tied to the construction period, that is the required jobs you have are only tied to hard costs, you'll know right here after construction is done and certificate of occupancy is granted that you have created all the jobs necessary. So while you might know that you have your green card secured here, you have to wait all of this time until you can actually get your conditional green card. So that's just something to keep in mind. In a regional center such as ours, that's how we underwrite our deals so that our investors can have that sense of security. During this entire process, the money needs to be outstanding in the loan instrument. It needs to be at risk during this entire immigration process. So that is part of the program. So you have to expect your money to be outstanding for around a 10-year period of time. While it takes you 8 years to get your conditional green card, your money may be outstanding for 10 years in the loan instrument. Now you're getting paid an interest rate as well, and the green card is a return as well on that, but that's the period of time you have to think when you're making this investment.